Well, experience mapping is a fundamental tool for innovation. Probably the crux reason for it is that an innovation will succeed or fail if it is chosen to solve the right problem, if it knows what it's being hired by the customer to do. And mapping the journey of the customer and seeing what the pain points are is really the only way to find out the alternatives. The journey map and the moments of truth within that journey end up being the reference point against which any prototype is going to be judged as to, is this responsive to the problem we think our customer is hiring us to solve. We can always, of course, prototype everything if we had unlimited resources, but that's not the world we live in. Right? That's a waste of resources to not know what you're after. And I think we find that the products and services that know what unique problem they're being hired to solve have a much greater likelihood of being able to introduce some very innovative experience elements, and particularly ones that aren't so expensive. We can innovate without throwing the kitchen sink at the problem and changing everything if we just have a deeper insight into what are we being hired for. We're trained as left-brain analytical people. MBA students, classic example, will come in with really impressive left-brain credentials very often, and we're trained to be measured in our time from observation to judgment. The shorter the time, the sharper we are. There's a magic in experience innovation that in withholding judgment and in having a beginner's mind. And that's not a well-trained muscle for most of us. To beginner's mind, all things are possible, right? And that's a state that it's difficult to get to. And at the very least, you can trick yourself there by saying, I need to generate alternatives, right? The Goldilocks principle is a good one. As we lay out the steps in a journey, we tend as analysts to focus on the steps that we see. So if you're a company that provides banking services, you tend to focus on filling out a form, submitting a form, making a balance request, making a deposit, whatever those things are. What's really interesting about journey mapping is there's a lot of blind spots in between that very much affect how people see and experience your service. And so as we map the journey, what we often find is there's blind spots that we don't see, and the crux of the mapping is to start with the pieces that you see and then move up a level. Even beyond that is what happens emotionally in the life of the customer. It's hard for an organization to have a beginner's mind, particularly large, incumbent, successful organizations. Hey, I must be doing something right. I got here. We find a company that has an opportunity to leverage experiences. They haven't done anything wrong. The things they've done are right, but there's something missing. One reason is because we got big and successful by being very, very specialized, right? So we've carved up into specialties because specialties scale. So we have a marketing department, and we have a consumer promotions department, and we have a brand management department, and we have a design agency, and they all specialize very deeply, and there aren't many horizontal specialists. Experience design is a basically horizontal process, and so startups have a crazy advantage because startups are nothing but horizontal, right? It gets into an area that we don't feel comfortable talking about, which is human emotions. We've developed a muscle in every business discipline that is driven by the left side of our brain. Analytics, right? Data-driven, and experience data is very subtle and very soft. Fundamentally, what we're getting at is a really interesting new realm about how human beings make meaning with the products and services that are in their life, and that's again very Eastern. And so, global companies based in the West have a harder time getting their organizations oriented towards thinking about how humans make meaning. If you want to succeed at experience innovation, you've got to set the whole thing up so that you choose the innovations that you're going to try based on the experience map you use, and not, as we see some companies do, with great intention, certainly. A second thing, and this is more subtle, is very often we want to create alternatives and then pick the answer ourselves and then validate the answer. And in experiences, multiple answers are almost always necessary because we may think we've gotten to the heart of it, and we are not the right people to validate that. The customers are the right people. Our consumers may not be able to tell us what they're looking for, but when they see it, they'll say, wow, I like that one. One of the keys to success for experience innovation is we've got to commit to multiple low-fidelity prototypes and putting those prototypes in front of customers. That very often the team that develops a prototype also judges its worthiness, and that's a flawed design. One of the companies we studied this is now 2 years ago, introduced a smoking cessation product. Right? What a great thing for a group of scientists and marketers to solve.